Everything that we're doing here, there's a pattern. Do you see it? When y'all did that assignment one, did y'all see the pattern? Or did it go over your head?
I'm not catching on to what you're saying, really, no.
Did somebody else say something? Yeah, pattern. Everything has a pattern. To be a software developer, you got to recognize the pattern. One of the patterns I pointed out to you is on line B, and then you're about to see it on line B right here. There's a pattern here when we write line 17. You learned that also a pattern that, okay, I've been noticing that we've been using empty strings for the candidate name and the candidate answer. I've been using an empty string here. Pretty soon you're going to start learning that, okay, on these console.logs, for me to know what's inside a variable, I've been running a pattern. I've been running a pattern. There's a pattern to when I need to go ahead and convert a type from one type to the other. And when to act, the pattern is, where do I implement that? You just learned there's a pattern that the DOM reads from top to bottom, and everything goes from one line to the next line. And if I put my console.logs in the wrong place, it breaks the pattern and it won't read correctly. So when I did that candidate name with the number, with the candidate name in it and assign it to the new candidate name, but if I put that before the input, it won't read it. It's out of order. And so we need to understand patterns. Now, let me I can do, let me see if I can, there's an app on here that I haven't used yet. So I wonder if I'm going to be experimenting with you right now. Let me see, where is it at? Is it here? I'll play around with it later. So I'm gonna click this. All right, I am going to, let me see, draw. Where's the pen at? Is there a pen here? All right, let me see if it's gonna let me draw. All right, all right. Yeah, I see that, right? Yeah, see that little blue squiggly thing that I wrote up there?
Yeah, I see it.
All right, so let me clear that, clear all drawing. All right, so in binary numbers, we know that there's zeros and ones. Yeah, I know that, right? So far, base 2. You already understand base 10 because that's what we were taught. We were taught base 10. We were taught by, it's called decimal numbers. And decimal numbers are base 10, 0 to 9. And the rule to base 10 is to add 1, increment by 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And it goes all the way down to 9. But when it gets to 9, it can't go, it doesn't go what we call 10. It has a place value. That means 0 through 9 are the ones that place value. The moment I try to add 1 to 9 at the bottom, it resets it back to 0. And then it adds the 1 over into the 10 column. And we do all of that all the way down to 99. So 1 plus 9 is 0. 1 plus, and then that 1 goes over to the next one because it can't occupy that place, that space. So it said 9 plus, can I occupy the next place? Can I increment 9 there? No. It goes, so it resets back to 0. Then it goes to the next place. That's where it's empty, and it adds the 1. And then we can do that 1 all the way up to 999. So you get the picture. But binary is only base 2. It's only 2 numbers right there, right? 0 and 1. Each one of these numbers right here is what we call a bit. You know what that means? A bit is 0 is a bit, 1 is a bit. And a bit has 2 elements. And the 2 elements of a bit is state and value. Now, why is this important for me to point this out to you? Because you don't need to know this to become a software developer. But let me say this, you need to know this to be a software developer. So we know that a bit has a state of value, but guess what a bit is also? A bit is a switch. You know what a switch is because you are familiar with light switches, right? And that state of a bit is either going to be on or off, true or false. That's the state. You're going to use state throughout the rest of your career. You need to understand state. This empty string right here, over here inside of my when I did the candidate name and I assigned it the empty string, I'm setting up the state. The state of that candidate name is an empty string. Whenever I put a value in there, I am setting up the state. I can always change the state. That's why everything in JavaScript is a object. Objects can be changed and manipulated. Except for primitive data types, they cannot be, they're immutable because they don't have properties and they do not have methods. That's why primitive data types are immutable. Now, think of that switch. When you turn it on, when you come into the room, you ask yourself the question, is that switch on? Well, we know that if it's off, it's 0. That's false. If it's on, that's true. That's 1. Now, how does this switch stuff works? A bit, it takes 8 of these bits to make 1 byte. This goes back to memory. All of this information over here that we're learning, all of this stuff is being stored in memory. And each one of these bits have a pattern. So let me ask you this question. If our value for counting is 0, at 1 plus 0 is 1, and if the value of 0 over here is 0, that's self-explanatory, and the value of 1 is 1, what's the value of 2? Can anybody tell me what the value of 2 is? What's the value of 2?
Is it 2 0 1s?
2 0 1s.
I don't know.
All right, let's count. Let's count. 0 plus 1 is 1. So if I do 1 plus 1, remember how we count in binary. If I do 1 plus 9, what happens? It made it to the end. What happened? If I put that 0 there, it goes to the next place value. That is the number 2. That's the value of number 2 in binary, 1 0. But what about 3? Well, I can add 1 here now, can I? So now 1, and then I carry down the 1, just like in a decimal number. That's 3. 1 1 equals 3. Now, this is the fun one. This is why I want you to start seeing patterns. So when I get over to 4, I go 1 plus, I add 1 to 1. That's going to be 0, right? Because it resets itself. Well, it's going to go over to the next column. Is there a 0 there? No, it's a 1. So 1 plus 1 over there, it's going to reset to 0. When I get to 4, when I get to the next placeholder, there's nothing there. So now I get a 1. So now 1 0 0 is 4. Now I want you to see patterns here. Can y'all see a pattern so far? Somebody tell me, what pattern do you see? Or what pattern is for me? If I continue to count forward, can you tell me what the number?
Probably 111 is going to be next.
Well, it's going to be next, but let's say that's not, I don't want to do the 111. I want to do everything that's like this. So what would be this number right here? If I do 1 0 0 0, and then 1 0 0 0. I need one more 0 here. Let me see. There we go. So if by looking at that pattern, What values will be assigned to 100 and 1000? 4 zeros.
Guess an 8. Is it 8 and 16?
Okay, there you go. Why? Do you know why that is?
Well, I can see the pattern, but
There you go. You see in a pattern. That's the important thing. You see in a pattern. And remember, we said it takes 8 bits to make 1 byte, right? It takes 8 bits to make 1 byte. So I need 8 zeros, right? So if I had 8 zeros right here, don't look the best, but I have 8 zeros. This is considered 1 byte. That's just as many bytes you're going to get, but you have 8 placeholders here. So if this is going to be 1, because remember in arrays, we said 0 indexed. This is how understanding 0 index. Well, 0 is an index, so it has a value. So we got 1, 2. What's the next number here? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, right? Now, look at the 1 over here. I got 1 0 at 1 0 is 2, right? Then I got 1 0 0 is 4. 1 0 0 0 is 8. 1 0 0 0 is 16. So if this first one, so how would I do that? So if 2 to the first power is what?
2.
Is 2, okay. 2 to the second power is what?
4.
All right. 2 cube is
8. I don't know.
now you're right, 8.
What is it?
So look at so if remember we're base 2. And so we're doing, so the next one is 2 to the 4. 2 to 4 is 16. So now, what would be 2 to 5? If I had 5 zeros, what would be the next number? And pay attention to how they're exponentially growing. They're doubling. 2, 4, 8, 16. So what would be the next one?
32.
32. And so if I got 5 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I know that's 32. I know that's 32. That means I can look at this and it's like, I just count the zeros. Okay, that's 32 because it's going to have a 1 with 5 zeros. And then over here, when it get to 6, when I go 6 to with 6 zeros, I know that's 64. When it's 7 zeros, I know it's 128. And when it's 8 zeros, well, really, it's not. It's going to stop at 1. So it's going to be. This is going to be a 1 right here, and I'm gonna have 7 zeros. That's going to be all the numbers in a byte. So the reason why I want to show this to you because start learning to look for the patterns and things. The computer can only read these zeros and ones. And so whenever we go through and we start learning how to write stuff, when you start looking at when we did our slice and you put that empty string in there, well, guess what? There's a value to that. That's added, a value is added to that empty string. So there's a binary code number that goes with that 0. I only have to know 0 through 9 for us the numbers because I know 0 to 9 and I know the binary numbers for 0 to 9, and then that's going to be converted over to, I just move it over a place, which, okay, I move it over to place, I move it over to another place to get multiple numbers all together. So I just wanted y'all to kind of see that because I want y'all to know that there's patterns here, and as you continue to learn as we go through programming, look for the pattern. So is that making sense? I know it probably went a little bit over, but come back and look at the video and do some research on this stuff. But there's a pattern here. And that's what helped me as a developer. When I started looking for the patterns, I was able to start solving problems a lot faster. And then we got something what we call design patterns anyway. You got to learn design patterns later on. Go ahead. Who was saying something?
I'm trying to get to your word. Are you talking of pattern? Something like
Say it
that?
again.
I'm sorry. I think there is a word you're using there about, I don't know, it's pattern or battery.
Pattern. Let me type it over here for you. I'm gonna type it in the chat.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
Sometimes.
okay. Trust me, I understand.
Can you
That's
explain
what.
to us the pattern that you're talking about, Terrence?
Which pattern?
Well, what you were getting at, what you were asking us in the working on.
What I'm trying to get you to understand is, as you go through it and you learning this stuff, look for those little small patterns. Look for.
Can you point some out? I think you were saying that there's some in what we're working on now. Can you point some out?
Well, like I was saying, what was one of the patterns that the first pattern you wanted to learn is the DOM, how the DOM is reading from top to bottom. You should be able to know what the output is before you hit the output. So what I'm saying is when you're writing your code, like right here on this candidate name input, you already know what the output is supposed to be because you already understand the input question, what is your name? You know that when we get down here to ask the question, understanding that input question is going to prompt the user a question. Right now on line 17, we told you to write a string, but you don't need to write a string. All you need is the variable. From here on out, you need to learn how to use these variables because as you begin to write bigger and more complex programming languages, you're not going to be hard coding anything into your program. Like right here, what's your name? You're not going to hard code that in. You're going to be passing in variables. And remember, a variable is a reference. It's a reference to what's being stored inside of it. That makes sense?
Yes.
Now, with the pattern things, because I want to make sure that I'm hitting home on this pattern thing. This is a pattern right here. We see B. We already did A. Now, let's go down here to B right here. Now, who wants to answer this since everybody had a chance? Who wants to read B?
I can.
Go ahead, read it.
Find to do 1.2b using your question variable, display the question and prompt the candidate for their answer. Store the response in one of the variables and you defined just above.
Now, now reading that, you've already done this, so you kind of have an idea of what we're saying. But when you first read it, did it confuse you?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And the reason why is because we asked you to do the exact same thing that we told you to do up here on the B up here. It's the exact same thing. Because if you read it by knowing what you know now, you're like, they kind of tell me to do the same thing. It says, write a code asking the user to enter their name into the program and store their values as candidate. We gave you a little bit more information. But down here, if you start noticing the pattern, we're giving you less information. We don't give you all the information. We're not going to even give you the declared variables anymore. We're just going to say declare variable and assign it this. You got to already know what to do. We may give you a hint on what to call it, but eventually we're going to get to the point we ain't going to even tell you that. You got to figure it out. Makes sense? So I want you to start seeing how things are shifting already. And so when we get to this B, it says use your question variable. Well, here's my question variable right here where I've already initialized it with a question. This is confusing because I have questions right here. I have correct answers. I have 3 different things. This is so easy to get confused right here. I can understand. But because I've been doing it long enough, I would have probably got tripped up the first time. But then I went, oh, no, that ain't right. I would have figured it out quickly. But if you're new to this is confusing because you gave me question and questions, one plural, one singular. But then when I get down here to ask that question, I'm doing the exact same thing on line 23 that you did on line 17. But what's the difference?
You were the variable will be candidate answer, and then the input question in parentheses, you will put question, the question variable that we defined.
Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing, even though I got a different variable name and I'm passing in a variable versus passing in a string. That makes sense?
Yep.
Okay. And so like I say, I'm gonna go ahead and do this because I don't feel like typing all this out. I highly don't recommend y'all. If nobody's watching you, it's a different thing. You don't have to you could probably type faster than when somebody's not watching you. So here we go. That's how it would look, right? Okay, so we know it's working, and then I would test it by console.logging the candidate answer just to make sure my answer is being stored in the candidate answer. Now, the last part of this is to come down here and write the conditional. Now, my question is this. Y'all notice that this on line 29, we have let grade. That's in function grade quiz, right? Do y'all see that anywhere else in our code?
No.
It's only in this grade quiz function. Can anybody explain to me why? Why is it like that? You haven't learned this yet. You're coming to it, but let me give you a chance to stab at it. Take a stab at it, rather. Okay. How many of y'all understand what let means?
It's an initializing of a variable.
Let's look at this.
Declaring.
We need to know the difference. We want to understand that. Let me see. I am going to use.
Let can be changed.
Let's see what this explanation is if it pops up. All right, it says var let const. What's the difference? All right, it says one of the features that came with ES6 is the addition of let and const, which can be used for variables declaration. The question is, what makes them different from good old var, which we've been using? If you are still not clear about this, this is the article for you. Now, the reason why I want to kind of point that out to you see that keyword right there, scope. Scope. And I can read this if it's article, if you want, I'll put it in chat so you can get an understanding. The reason why this let grade is, and I'm just going to explain it so y'all can go, that let grade, let means lexical. In a nutshell, local. Up here, we define let for all of these variables, and we define const for this variable. But 1 through 13, all of those variables are global variables. Anybody understand what that means?
Does it mean it applies to the entirety of the code block?
Yes.
Of the program?
Yeah, of the file. That means everything on this file has access to these variables. So this is why ask for name, I have access to candidate name. And also down here, candidate answer, I have access to it, to these functions. Ask for name, ask question. Even grade quiz has access to it. But let grade, none of these two functions have access to let grade, because let grade is only local to this grade quiz. Only grade quiz has access to this variable. This right here will confuse, because sometimes people try to write the program and try to access let grades up here and ask for name or ask question or something to make it work. And it won't work because it can't see it. it's going to keep saying let grade or grade has not been declared because it can't find it. But if long as it's being accessed in grade quiz, you can see it. But if I wanted to let grade be access to all three of these functions, I would have to place it up here outside the functions and make it global. There's arguments for both. But in your cases, as in the future, as we get more and more into programming, you're not going to be declaring too many global variables. Everything will be inside functions most of the time. Did that make sense?